The night my own family staged an intervention to disown me, unaware I'd built a secret business empire that would flip our legacy forever. Alright, so let me set the scene. I'm Alex, the black sheep of my family. At least that's what they've always called me. My family is all about appearances. We're talking a whole clan obsessed with shiny things, literally. My parents own a chain of jewelry stores, the kind where rich people go to spend a year's worth of rent on something they'll wear twice. To them, jewelry isn't just business, it's their identity. And apparently, I'm the blemish that tarnishes their perfect image. It's not like I'm some deadbeat who spends my days playing video games in the basement. Far from it. I've got my own business designing and customizing high-end bikes. I'm not talking about the kind you get from a sporting goods store. These are handcrafted, sleek machines with insane attention to detail. Bikes that cost more than some cars. My clients, CEOs, celebrities, and collectors who want something one of a kind. But here's the thing. I keep a pretty low profile. I don't drive flashy cars or wear overpriced watches. My workshop isn't in some shiny office park. It's in an old industrial building that I bought outright. My team is small, just a few people I trust, and we churn out bikes that have a wait list 6 months long. My family? They don't know any of this. To them, I'm just the guy who chose a hobby over the family business. Growing up, my parents made it clear what they valued most: success, money, and keeping up appearances. My older brother Ethan was groomed to take over the jewelry empire. He's got the whole firstborn golden child thing down to a science. Vanessa, my sister, is their pride and joy because she married into money. And then there's Daniel, the baby of the family, who can do no wrong even though he's coasting on the family name. I guess I was doomed from the start. I didn't want what they wanted. They loved the limelight, the constant need to network, and the pressure to maintain this image of a perfect family. I hated it. When I was a kid, I'd sneak away from their stupid galas and charity dinners to tinker with anything I could get my hands on. Broken radios, old bikes, anything mechanical. That's how I found my passion. The older I got, the more obvious it became that I didn't fit in. My parents wanted me to join the family business, but I couldn't think of anything worse than selling jewelry to people who care more about price tags than craftsmanship. No thanks. I wanted to build something with purpose. So after college, which they only paid for because they thought I'd eventually come to my senses, I started working on my bike designs. At first it was just me in my garage, but the demand grew fast. I poured everything I had into the business, time, energy, money, and it paid off. My designs started getting noticed, and suddenly I had clients who were willing to spend ridiculous amounts of money for my work. Here's where it gets funny. My family knows I'm self-employed, but they think I'm barely scraping by. They have no idea how successful I've become because I don't show it off. I drive a regular car, wear regular clothes, and avoid their little networking events like the plague. They take my quiet lifestyle as proof that I failed. The truth is, I'm doing better than all of them combined. My business has hit 7 figures. I've got partnerships with big brands, a workshop that's booked out for months, and a reputation that's spreading globally. But none of that matters to them because, in their eyes, success isn't real unless you're wearing it on your wrist or parking it in the driveway. Every time I visit them, it's the same routine. Ethan brags about his latest strategic partnership, which is just a fancy way of saying Dad set up a deal for him. Vanessa drops hints about her fabulous life, which mostly involves being a socialite. Daniel acts like a frat bro who never outgrew his college glory days. And me? I get the polite fake smiles and passive-aggressive comments about my potential. Still working on those bikes, Dad? He'll ask in that tone that screams disappointment. Yeah, I'll say, keeping it short because there's no point in explaining myself. One time Vanessa straight up asked if I needed help finding a real job. I laughed and told her I was good. But she gave me this look like she'd just done me a favor by suggesting it. The worst part is, they don't even ask about my business. Not really. They assume it's a phase I'll grow out of, like I'm some teenager who doesn't know what he's doing. It's insulting, but also kind of hilarious. They're so wrapped up in their own world, so convinced that their way is the only way, that they don't even see what's right in front of them. I've kept my success to myself for a reason. It's not that I'm hiding it, I just don't feel the need to prove anything. My work speaks for itself, and the people who matter know the truth. My clients respect what I do, my team is incredible, and I've built something I'm genuinely proud of. I don't need their validation, and I definitely don't need their approval. But the thing is, they're not content to let me live my life. They'd been dropping hints, subtle comments about how my choices reflect on the family. Apparently, not being part of the jewelry business is some kind of betrayal. They act like I owe them something, like I'm letting them down by not falling in line. Ethan cornered me at one of Mom's dinner parties and started lecturing me about family legacy. He actually said, "You're either with us or against us." I almost choked on my drink. Against you? Dude, I'm just trying to live my life. And then, here we are. A text from Dad, short and sharp, family meeting, 8 p.m., be there. So I showed up to the family meeting, fully prepared for some sort of lecture, maybe even an argument. I wasn't prepared for the circus that was waiting for me. The moment I walked into the house, I could feel the tension in the air. It was like stepping onto a stage where the script had already been written, and I was the only one who hadn't read it. My dad opened the door and gave me this disapproving once-over, like he was already annoyed that I existed. He didn't even say hello. Instead, he just muttered, "You're late," and stepped aside to let me in. For context, my dad's definition of late is anything less than 10 minutes early. So yeah, I was technically on time, but to him I might as well have been an hour behind schedule. I didn't bother arguing, there was no point. I just shrugged and walked in. The house looked exactly the same as it always did. Spotless, expensive, and completely soulless. Everything about it screamed, "Look how much money we have." From the oversized crystal chandelier in the foyer to the perfectly staged living room that no one actually used. It was all just a giant show. And speaking of the living room, that's where everyone was gathered, sitting in a perfect little semicircle, like they were about to hold a press conference. Ethan was on one side, dressed in his usual business casual uniform like he'd just come from a board meeting. Vanessa was perched next to him, scrolling through her phone, probably pretending to be busy. Daniel was sprawled out in a chair, looking like he didn't have a care in the world, but I knew him well enough to tell he was enjoying whatever drama was about to unfold. Then there was my mom, sitting off to the side like a nervous referee, wringing her hands and giving me that tight smile she always used when things were about to get uncomfortable. And of course there was my designated chair, a single lonely seat placed strategically in the center of the room, facing all of them. It was so obvious that this was an ambush that I almost laughed. Almost. Dad didn't waste any time. As soon as I sat down, he launched into his speech, talking about the importance of family unity and preserving the legacy. It was all very official, very rehearsed. Ethan chimed in at one point, using phrases like long-term strategy and brand image, which made me roll my eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Vanessa wasn't far behind, throwing in comments about how my choices were problematic and how they reflected on the family as a whole. She kept using words like reputation and status, as if those were the only things that mattered. Daniel didn't say much, but he didn't have to. He was just sitting there smirking like he was watching his favorite TV show. I didn't say a word. I just let them talk, nodding occasionally to let them think I was listening. Honestly, it was kind of fascinating to see how much effort they'd put into this whole thing. They really thought they were staging some kind of intervention, like they were saving me from a life of failure and embarrassment. Eventually, Vanessa handed me a folder. She slid it across the coffee table like she was presenting me with some kind of sacred document. "This is for the good of the family," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I opened the folder, and that's when I realized just how far they were willing to go. Inside were legal papers, all neatly organized and full of jargon. I didn't need a lawyer to understand the gist of it. They were cutting me off. No inheritance, no ties to the family business, no association with the family name. For a second, I just stared at the papers. Not because I was shocked I'd seen this coming from a mile away, but because it was hilarious how seriously they were taking this. They really thought this was some kind of punishment. Dad leaned forward, his tone all serious and authoritative. "This isn't personal, Alex. It's about business. Your actions have consequences." I raised an eyebrow. "My actions? You've made choices that don't align with the family's values," Ethan said, like he was reading from a script. Vanessa nodded. "It's not just about you, Alex. It's about all of us. We have to protect the family name." I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Instead, I flipped through the papers, pretending to read them carefully. The whole time, I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. Finally, I looked up and said, "Where do I sign?" The room went dead silent. I don't think they were expecting that. My mom was the first to break the silence. "Alex, wait. Don't you think you should—" "Nope," I said, cutting her off. "This is exactly what you want, right? To cut me loose? Let's get it over with." Vanessa blinked, clearly thrown off. "It's not about cutting you loose. It's about setting boundaries." "Boundaries," I repeated, smirking. Sure, let's call it that. Dad gestured to the bottom of the page. Just sign there. So I did. I grabbed the pen, scrawled my name at the bottom, and handed the folder back to Vanessa. She looked like she didn't know whether to be relieved or insulted. Is that all? I asked, standing up. Dad frowned. This isn't a joke, Alex. One day you'll understand that this was necessary. I nodded, already halfway to the door. Yeah, I'll be sure to send you a thank you card when that day comes. As I walked out, I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't look back. They thought they were making some kind of statement. But all they'd done was prove what I'd known all along. They didn't understand me, and they never would. When I got back to my workshop that night, I didn't feel upset or defeated. Honestly, I felt relieved. That family meeting was just confirmation of something I'd known for years. I wasn't one of them. They had no idea who I was or what I'd built, and they weren't interested in finding out. I flicked on the lights in my workshop, and the hum of the fluorescent bulbs was more comforting than anything I'd felt sitting in that over-decorated house. The space was my sanctuary, walls lined with tools, shelves stacked with custom parts, and rows of partially built bikes waiting for me to bring them to life. It was all mine, built with my own two hands. My assistant Ben was still there, finishing up some late orders. He looked up as I walked in. Hey, how'd it go? He asked, wiping his hands on a shop rag. They disowned me, I said casually, dropping my bag on the workbench. Ben blinked. Wait, like, officially? Yep, I said, grabbing a half-finished frame from the rack and inspecting the welds. Signed the papers and everything. I'm no longer part of the family. He let out a low whistle. Damn. You okay? I shrugged. Honestly, yeah, they think they cut me off, but I'm the one who's been carrying them emotionally for years. They did me a favor. We worked in silence for a while, the only sounds coming from the buzz of tools and the occasional clang of metal. It was peaceful, the kind of peace I'd never felt around my family. A couple of hours later, I logged into my business dashboard, and the numbers were enough to make me smile. Orders were through the roof. One of our recent designs had gone viral in the niche cycling world, and now people were practically throwing money at us. Custom requests, bulk orders from international clients, even inquiries from a couple of big-name brands wanting to collaborate. It was overwhelming in the best way. My inbox was flooded with emails, and while most were business-related, a few stood out. One from a journalist who wanted to write a feature on me for a lifestyle magazine. Another from a professional cyclist who wanted a custom bike for their next competition. And then there was the one that made me pause. A private client offering an absurd amount of money for a one-of-a-kind design. I leaned back in my chair and laughed. My family thought I was wasting my life tinkering with bikes, but this tinkering was bringing in more money than their jewelry business ever would. The thing is, I never cared about the money. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to be financially stable, to not have to worry about bills or debt. But that wasn't why I started this. I started it because I loved it. Because I wanted to create something with my hands. Something that was both functional and beautiful, something that mattered. But the money? That was a nice bonus, and the best part was it let me keep building without compromise. I didn't have to answer to anyone. Not investors, not shareholders, and definitely not my family. The next morning, I met with Josh, my business partner, at our favorite diner. Josh is one of those people who's always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. He's the reason we've been able to scale the business so quickly. All right, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. What's the plan? For what? I asked, sipping my coffee. For dealing with your family, he said. They're going to come crawling back eventually. You know that, right? I shrugged. Let them. I'm not going to waste my energy worrying about them. I've got bigger things to focus on. Josh smirked. Fair enough. Speaking of bigger things, we need to talk about this. He pulled out his laptop and showed me an email from one of our suppliers. They were offering us an exclusive deal on some new materials, but we'd have to commit to a larger production run than usual. Can we handle it? I asked. Easily, Josh said. With the orders we've got coming in, we could double our output and still have room to breathe. This is a no-brainer. Do it, I said. Josh grinned. Done. As the weeks went by, things only got better. The magazine feature came out, and it was a game-changer. The journalist wrote this glowing article about how I turned a passion for bikes into a thriving business, complete with photos of our workshop and some of our best designs. The response was insane. Orders tripled overnight, and our social media accounts exploded with new followers. We had to hire 2 more people just to keep up with the demand. Ben, who'd been with me since the garage days, started training the new hires while I focused on designing our next big project. It was exhausting, but in the best way. Every now and then I'd think about my family, not in a sad or nostalgic way, but more out of curiosity. I wondered if they'd seen the article or heard about the business. Part of me wanted them to know, just to see the looks on their faces. But another part of me didn't care. I was too busy building something real, something they'd never understand. One day I got a call from a company that made high-end outdoor gear. They wanted to collaborate on a limited edition bike for their next product line. It was the kind of partnership that could take us to the next level, and I couldn't say yes fast enough. Josh and I spent weeks hammering out the details, working late nights to make sure everything was perfect. By the time the prototypes were ready, I knew we had something special. The launch was a massive success. The bike sold out within hours, and the buzz around the collaboration put us on the map in a way we'd never been before. Suddenly, we weren't just a small niche business, we were a brand. And through it all, my family was silent. Not a call, not a text, nothing. I didn't know if they were ignoring me or just clueless about what I was doing. Either way, it didn't matter. Their silence didn't last long, though. It started with a text. "We need to talk, urgent, family matters." Vanessa was the first to break the silence, as I figured she would be. My siblings were predictable like that. She always liked being the peacemaker when things got messy, but her version of peace usually involved making sure everyone saw her as the voice of reason. I ignored it. Then came another one, this time from Ethan. "Alex, let's meet. I think there's been a misunderstanding." That made me laugh out loud. A misunderstanding? The same guy who sat there with his perfect posture, watching me sign away my inheritance, now thought we had a little miscommunication. Yeah, sure. I didn't reply to him either. The texts kept rolling in over the next few days, each one more desperate than the last. Daniel finally showed up too, though his was just as lazy as he was. "Yo, you around? Stuff's happening." Real poetic, that one. But the one that made me pause was from my dad. "Come home. We need you." That was when I knew something had shifted. Dad didn't ask for things. He commanded, expected, demanded. Come home was about as close to begging as he'd ever get. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to respond. Part of me wanted to see just how far they'd go, but another part of me knew they'd eventually escalate. It wasn't in their nature to let things lie. They needed control, and I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. A week later, Josh and I were in the workshop when I got a call from an unknown number. "Hello, Alex," a familiar voice said, overly formal. It was Ethan. "We need to talk." I rolled my eyes. "I got your texts." "What do you want?" He hesitated for a second, which told me everything I needed to know. "It's about the family business." Ah, there it was. The family business. Of course. "We're having some challenges," he admitted, and I could practically hear the pain in his voice as he said the word. "It's not a great time for us, and we think you could help." "I could help?" I asked, leaning back in my chair and smirking. "That's interesting. Last time we talked, I was an embarrassment to the family. My choices didn't align with your values, remember?" "Alex," Ethan said, his tone shifting to that condescending older brother voice he loved so much. "Let's not dwell on the past. This is bigger than all of us." I laughed. "No, it's not. It's about you, Ethan, and Vanessa, and Dad, and the fact that none of you have any idea how to adapt to a world that's moving faster than you are." He tried to push back, but I cut him off. "I'm busy, Ethan. If the business is struggling, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't good enough to be part of the family." I hung up before he could respond. That was satisfying. The next move came a few days later when Vanessa showed up at my workshop unannounced. I was in the middle of fine-tuning a custom build for a new client when I saw her car pull into the parking lot. She stepped out in her designer heels and sunglasses, like she was walking into some fancy boutique, not a place where grease and metal were the main decor. I met her at the door, not bothering to hide my annoyance. "What are you doing here?" She gave me one of her overly polished smiles. "Alex, we need to talk." "I'm working," I said, crossing my arms. "This won't take long," she insisted, slipping past me into the workshop. She glanced around, clearly unimpressed by the organized chaos. "So this is what you've been doing? Bikes?" "Yep," I said, not offering anything more. She sighed and turned to face me. "Look, things aren't great right now. The business is struggling, and Dad's not handling it well. Ethan's trying to hold things together, but She trailed off, waiting for me to jump in and save the day. I didn't. Finally, she said, "We need you, Alex." Those words hit differently, but not in the way she probably thought. For years, I'd been the one they dismissed, the one who didn't measure up. And now they needed me. "What exactly do you think I can do?" I asked, leaning against one of the workbenches. "You've always been good with creative ideas," she said, her tone just a little too sweet. "And you've clearly been doing okay for yourself here." "Okay?" I said, raising an eyebrow. She flinched, realizing her mistake. "I didn't mean it like that. We're in trouble, Alex. The market's changing, and we didn't adapt fast enough. Sales are down, and he's too proud to admit we need help. But Ethan and I think you could bring something new to the table." I stared at her for a long moment, letting her words hang in the air. This was Vanessa, the same person who used to laugh at my little project, the same one who once told me I was wasting my potential. And now here she was, asking for my help. It felt good. "Let me get this straight," I said finally. "You want me to come back and fix the business after everything you guys pulled?" She nodded. "We made mistakes, I'll admit that. But we're trying to make things right." I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. "Yeah. No. I'm good." Vanessa's face fell. "Alex, please. This isn't just about us. It's about the legacy." "Your legacy," I corrected her. "Not mine. I already have something I'm proud of, and it doesn't involve begging people to buy overpriced necklaces." Her polished facade cracked for a second, and I saw a flash of frustration. But before she could say anything else, I opened the door and gestured for her to leave. "Have a nice day, Vanessa." And a week later, Dad himself showed up at the workshop, looking more tired and worn out than I'd ever seen him. He didn't even bother with pleasantries. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and serious. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Do we, though?" He sighed and ran a hand through his graying hair. "Alex, I'll admit it. We were wrong about you. About everything. The business is failing. I can't fix it. Your brother can't fix it. We need your help." I stared at him for a long moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. This was the man who'd always preached about pride and reputation, standing here now practically begging for my help. "I'll think about it," I said finally, stepping aside to let him in. And that was the moment I realized the tables had completely turned. When I told my dad I'd think about it, I wasn't planning to let them off the hook. If they wanted me to save the family business, they were going to have to sweat for it. For once in their lives, they needed to understand what it felt like to not hold all the cards. The next few days I let them stew. No calls, no texts, nothing. I wasn't ignoring them to be petty, okay, maybe just a little. I wanted them to realize that they weren't in control anymore. They disowned me like it was nothing, and now here they were, circling back, desperate to get me on board. I wasn't going to make it easy. Josh, of course, thought the whole thing was hilarious. "So let me get this straight," he said, leaning against the workbench while I fine-tuned a frame. "They need you to save their business, but they haven't apologized, and they definitely haven't admitted how much they screwed up." "Pretty much," I said, smirking. "And you're just letting them twist in the wind?" I shrugged. "Feels fair." Josh laughed. "Man, I wish I had your patience. I'd be rubbing it in their faces every chance I got." "Oh, don't worry," I said. "They'll get what's coming. But it's not going to be on their terms." A few days later, Vanessa called again. This time I picked up. "Alex," she said, sounding overly cheerful. "Thanks for finally answering. I was starting to think you were avoiding us." I ignored the bait. "What do you want?" She hesitated, and I could tell she was trying to figure out how to phrase whatever plea she was about to make. "I wanted to check in. See if you've given any more thought to, helping out with the family business." "I've thought about it," I said. "And I have a few conditions." She was quiet for a moment. "Okay. What kind of conditions?" "I want full control," I said, enjoying the moment. "Here's the deal. I'll take over the business. You'll stay on as employees. No titles, no power, just workers. You'll answer to me." Vanessa practically choked. "Wait, full control? Alex, that's non-negotiable." I cut her off. "If you don't like it, find someone else to fix your mess." She sputtered for a bit, trying to argue, but I stayed firm. Eventually, she said she'd talk to Dad and Ethan and get back to me. The next day, my dad showed up at the workshop again. He looked more put together this time, but the desperation in his eyes was still there. "Vanessa told me about your conditions," he said as soon as he walked in, and he sighed. It's a big ask, Alex. You're asking us to hand over the company that your mother and I built from the ground up. I leaned against the workbench and crossed my arms. No, I'm asking you to hand over the company that's failing because none of you know how to adapt. If you want me to save it, you have to let me run it my way. Otherwise, what's the point? He didn't say anything for a long time. I could see the internal struggle on his face. Finally, he nodded. Fine, you can have full control. But there's one condition. Here we go, I muttered. I want you to keep the family name attached to the business, he said. It's all we have left. I thought about it for a moment. It wasn't an unreasonable request, and honestly, I didn't care about the name one way or the other. Deal, I said. The real fun began after the family begrudgingly signed off on me taking full control. I didn't waste any time diving in. If they thought this was going to be some slow, gentle transition where they could argue or second-guess my decisions, they were dead wrong. This wasn't a democracy, it was a dictatorship, and I was the one holding the reins. The first thing I did after getting in charge was dismantle their precious hierarchy. Ethan had been running operations like he was auditioning for a reality show about clueless executives. His idea of leadership was yelling at people when things went wrong and taking credit when things went right. That wasn't going to fly. I called a staff meeting at the main office. All the managers, department heads, and key employees were invited. My family showed up too, but they looked uncomfortable as hell, sitting off to the side like kids waiting for the principal to yell at them. All right, I started, standing at the head of the conference table. Let's get one thing straight. The old way of doing things is dead. From now on, this company runs on results, not nepotism. A few people glanced nervously at Ethan, who was glaring at me like I'd just insulted his entire existence. I pointed at the whiteboard behind me where I'd outlined a clear strategy. We're streamlining everything. No more bloated budgets, no more unnecessary overhead, and no more outdated practices. If you have ideas, I want to hear them. If you've been stuck under layers of bureaucracy, that ends today. This is your chance to prove what you're capable of. One of the managers raised her hand. And what about the family? I smirked. They'll be held to the same standards as everyone else, no exceptions. Ethan scoffed, but I ignored him. Vanessa looked like she wanted to crawl under the table, and Daniel was half asleep. Classic. Next, I tackled the stores. Half of them were bleeding money because they hadn't been updated in decades. The displays were tired, the layouts were confusing, and the staff looked like they were just waiting for someone to put them out of their misery. I shut down the worst-performing locations immediately. Some of the employees were upset, which I understood, but I made sure to offer severance packages and job placement assistance. This wasn't about punishing people. It was about saving the company. The remaining stores got a complete overhaul. I brought in designers to modernize the spaces, turning them into sleek, minimalist showrooms that focused on the products instead of gimmicky sales tactics. I also introduced a new inventory system that made it easier for customers to browse and buy, whether they were in-store or online. Speaking of online, that was another major area where the company had been failing. Their website looked like it was stuck in 2005, complete with clunky navigation and blurry photos. I scrapped the whole thing and hired a team of developers to build a new site from scratch. It was fast, user-friendly, and optimized for mobile. Within weeks of launching, online sales skyrocketed. Then came the product line. This was where I really put my stamp on things. For years, the company had been churning out the same old designs, gaudy, overpriced jewelry that catered to an aging clientele. It was fine for the older crowd, but it completely ignored younger customers who wanted something fresh and modern. I introduced a new collection focused on minimalist, sustainable designs. Think elegant pieces made from recycled materials with a focus on craftsmanship and storytelling. Each piece came with a card explaining where the materials came from and how they were repurposed. It was a hit. People loved the idea of owning something unique that didn't come at the expense of the environment. At first, Vanessa hated the idea. She argued that it was too risky and not what our customers expect. But when the numbers started coming in, she had to admit I was right. Of course, not everything went smoothly. There were plenty of moments where I had to deal with pushback, mostly from my own family. Ethan in particular seemed determined to undermine me at every turn. He'd pull me aside after meetings and say things like, "Are you sure this is the right move? I mean, you're new to this level of management." I'd just smile and say, "You're welcome to step aside if you think you can't handle the changes." That usually shut him up. And Daniel, honestly, I didn't even know what he was doing half the time. He'd show up to meetings late, if at all, and contribute nothing. I eventually gave him a minor role managing the company's social media accounts, which kept him busy enough without causing any real damage. Despite the challenges, the results spoke for themselves. Within 6 months, the company was unrecognizable, in the best way. Sales were up across the board, the new product lines were getting rave reviews, and we'd even started attracting younger, more tech-savvy customers. The best part? My family was starting to feel the power shift. They'd spent their entire lives at the top of the food chain, but now they were just employees like everyone else. They answered to me. One day I called a meeting with just the 4 of us. Me, Dad, Ethan, and Vanessa. I wanted to make sure they understood exactly where we stood. "Let me be clear," I said, leaning back in my chair. "This company is mine now. If you want to stay, you'll do things my way. If you don't like it, there's the door." Dad frowned but didn't say anything. Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, but Vanessa put a hand on his arm and shook her head. "I'm serious," I continued. "I'm not here to keep the family legacy alive. I'm here to build something better. If that means letting go of the past, so be it." For once, no one had anything to say. The turning point came when one of the industry's biggest trade shows invited us to showcase the new collection. It was the kind of event that could make or break a company's reputation, and I was determined to make an impression. I designed the booth myself, creating a sleek, immersive experience that highlighted the sustainable designs and told the story of the company's transformation. My family was there, of course, but this time they weren't the stars of the show. I was. Customers, journalists, and industry leaders flocked to our booth, praising the new direction and asking how we'd managed to turn things around so quickly. I made sure to give credit where it was due, mainly to the employees who'd worked tirelessly to make it happen. As I watched people admire the pieces I'd helped create, I felt a sense of pride I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just about saving a business, it was about proving to myself and to them that I was capable of so much more than they'd ever given me credit for. By the end of the show, we'd secured several new partnerships, and the buzz around the brand was bigger than ever. My family was finally starting to understand that I wasn't just the black sheep anymore. I was the one leading the charge. Then one day it happened. The moment I'd been waiting for. We just wrapped up a quarterly review meeting where I presented some of the best numbers the company had ever seen. I was closing out the presentation when my dad cleared his throat. "Alex," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I just want to say I'm proud of you. You've done something none of us could have done. You didn't just save the business, you made it better." The room went silent. Even Ethan and Vanessa looked surprised. "Thanks," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Vanessa chimed in. "Dad's right. We should have seen your potential sooner. You've taken this company to places we never thought possible." Ethan nodded reluctantly. "You proved us all wrong. I can admit that." It was a strange feeling, hearing them admit it out loud. "We've been talking," Dad continued, glancing at the others. "We'd like to fix things. Not just the business, but us. The family." There it was. The apology, the olive branch. I sat back in my chair, letting their words hang in the air for a moment. "I appreciate that," I said. "But let's be honest. You didn't want me in the family until I became useful. That's not something I can forget." Vanessa looked down, clearly uncomfortable, but she didn't argue. "I'm not interested in pretending everything's fine," I continued. "What we have now works. We're working together, that's it. I don't need anything more." Ethan frowned. "Alex, come on. We're family. We made mistakes, but we're trying to make it right." "You're trying to make it right because you have no choice," I said, keeping my tone calm. "If this business had gone under, you wouldn't be here right now. Let's not rewrite history." Dad looked like he wanted to argue, but then he sighed and nodded. "Fair enough. Here's the deal," I said, standing up and gathering my notes. "I'll keep running the business, and you'll keep doing your jobs. But outside of that, we're good where we are. No more pretending to be a happy family. We tried that, and it didn't work." The room was quiet as I left the meeting. But I didn't feel bad about it. I wasn't angry, and I wasn't bitter. I just knew where I stood, and I wasn't going to let them cross that line again. My own family staged an intervention to disown me, but they had no idea I was already richer than all of them combined.